This happened about 3 or 4 years ago. That night, I was reading a horror novel until the early hours of the morning. I don't remember the exact time. After not drinking any water all night, I felt parched and decided to leave my room to get some water. At that moment, I heard the sound of the national anthem, but it wasn't the solemn and majestic version. Instead, it had a strange and eerie tone, like the shrill, intermittent sound from an old, broken phonograph. It sounded old and choppy. At first, I thought it was a car downstairs, but then I realized that couldn't be right. Because I had the air conditioning on, my room's windows were closed, so the sound shouldn't be so clear. I felt like the sound was coming from somewhere inside the house, so I followed it to the living room. To my shock, the sound was coming from a bauhinia flower ornament that my grandfather had brought back from Hong Kong years ago. I remembered that when I was little, the ornament had a switch that played the national anthem, but it had broken down long ago. When we tried to get it fixed, we were told it couldn't be repaired due to irreplaceable parts. Moreover, it had been sitting there for ages and had no power, so it shouldn't have been able to make any sound at all. Yet, it was producing that eerie, shrill sound intermittently. When I discovered that the ornament was the source of the sound, I instantly felt my hair stand on end. I stood there, fiddling with the switch repeatedly, but to no avail. It continued to sing in that eerie manner. I'm naturally timid, and my mind went blank at that moment, but I kept trying to get it to stop making noise. Eventually, after much effort, it finally stopped, but the process was truly creepy. Even after it stopped, I felt like it could start again any second. After it finally stopped, I hurried back to my room. I had come out barefoot because I was afraid my parents would catch me still being awake. The next day, I told my parents about it. They said they hadn't heard anything and didn't know I had been up in the middle of the night. They reassured me that the ornament had probably deteriorated. After that, no matter how much I fiddled with it, it never made any sound again. I am an art student, and this story began during my art training. The training was very stressful, and one day, I had a breakdown and cried a lot. After that day, things started to go wrong. At first, it was just that I would wake up but couldn't move. Later, I started feeling like someone was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, or like someone was pulling me into the darkness. Once, during a nap, I suddenly felt the blanket at my feet being yanked forcefully. I woke up scared but couldn't move. I was lying on my side and suddenly felt someone touching my neck. I was terrified but couldn't move. I tried to look back and saw a black shadow lying beside me, lightly scratching the back of my neck and hair with its hand. Then it made a creepy woman's laugh. I was scared out of my mind, struggling desperately until I woke up. Strangely, after that, I didn't experience sleep paralysis again. I thought it might have been due to the intense stress at that time. The sleep paralysis started again when I returned to school for my academic classes after the art training was over. When the results of the training exams came out, and they weren't as good as I had hoped, I had another breakdown and cried in the dorm. After crying, I adjusted my mindset and went to evening self-study. After returning to the dorm from self-study, the sleep paralysis began again. It started with just waking up but being unable to move, then progressed to feeling pressure on my chest and struggling to breathe, with pain. Those days, I was in poor spirits and couldn't sleep well, even fearing sleep. Then I started seeing things again. Once, while sleeping, I saw a black shadow standing at the head of my bed, wearing a black robe, staring at me. Although I was scared, I was also furious, thinking of the recent suffering. I started cursing the shadow with foul language. After a while, the shadow silently turned and walked out to the balcony. When I woke up, it was already light. I got up to go to the balcony to wash up and found the balcony door had been pushed open about the width of a person. As I was the last one to come in from the balcony the night before, I clearly remembered closing the door, which had a handle that needed to be turned to open. It couldn't have been opened by the wind. I glanced at my roommates, who were still asleep. When they woke up, I asked if anyone had gone to the toilet outside last night or this morning. They all said no, and I felt a chill run down my spine. My sister and I shared a room, with our beds arranged as bunk beds, and I slept on the upper bunk. That night, I fell asleep quickly. I had a nightmare. I felt uneasy and suddenly opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling. I vaguely sensed movement by the window and, out of the corner of my eye, saw a woman in white with long hair standing there silently. I was terrified, not knowing if she was facing me or turned away, so I just stared at her, unable to look away. Suddenly, I woke up, finding myself still staring at the ceiling, with everything around me silent. I habitually glanced at the window, seeing no one there, and let out a sigh of relief. However, I then felt someone slowly climbing onto my bed, and cold sweat broke out instantly. I wanted to call my sister on the lower bunk but found I couldn't make a sound or move my body, only my eyes. The sensation was like being pressed by a ghost. The cold feeling intensified, and my fear grew. Suddenly, I opened my eyes again, unable to make a sound, with tears streaming down my face. I felt her hair lightly brushing against my face. Desperately struggling, I remembered reading in Alice in Wonderland that feeling pain in a dream would wake you up. So, I dug my middle fingers nail-hard into my palm. Despite the pain, I still couldn't wake up. She got closer, and I could clearly see her face because the streetlight outside shone through the window, making her features seem real. I tried to scream but couldn't, tried to push her away but couldn't move. I didn't give up, my strong desire to survive driving me to keep struggling. Finally, I felt my body start to regain movement and I sat up abruptly, drenched in cold sweat, my heart racing. The room was silent except for my rapid breathing. I looked around, confirming I was fully awake, and the woman in white was gone. I glanced at my sister on the lower bunk, who was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of my panic. Slowly calming down, I decided to go to the bathroom to wash my face. Climbing down the ladder quietly, I made my way to the bathroom. I turned on the faucet, and the cold water splashed on my face, helping me regain some composure. After washing my face, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, as if to confirm whether the earlier experience was real. Suddenly, the bathroom light flickered, making my heart race again. I quickly turned off the faucet and returned to the room. The next morning, I was woken up by my alarm. Sunlight streamed through the curtain gaps, making everything seem normal. I got out of bed to wake my sister and told her about the nightmare. She looked worried but suggested it might have been a hallucination caused by recent stress. Despite her reassurance, that night's experience was deeply etched in my mind. Whenever night fell, I couldn't help but recall the woman in white, fearing she might reappear. To alleviate my fear, I started sleeping with the light on.